Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Introduction to Psychology Part 2 by Dear Knowledge. Okay, we have started the chapter 2 and it's all about emotions, and I already told you that chapter 2 is going to be a bit detailed one, so that's why I divided the chapter 2 into different parts, so it will be easy for you people to understand and digest the topic very easily. So let's have a quick overview, or let's have a quick recap of the prior knowledge. So in the part 1, we have learned about the defining emotions and components of emotions. And in defining emotions, again, we have learned about the definitions of the different well-known personalities in the field of psychology. And then we came up with a short conclusion about the different definitions, the conclusions that were drawn from the different definitions of emotions that were given by the well-known personalities in the field of psychology. And after that, we learn about the components of emotions, which include the cognitive component, the behavioral component, the physiological component. So different types of components of emotions were covered in the part 1 of chapter 2. Then come to the part 2, which was about the characteristics of emotions. And under the topic of characteristics of emotions, we learned about different characteristics that are involved in emotions. And then there was part 3, in which we learned about the functions of emotions. And I also told you that in part 3 we covered about the functions of emotions, importance of emotions, and advantages of emotion. Then about the part 4, in which we learn about the arousal of emotions, and in which we learn about different factors that were involved in the arousal of emotions and what kind of changes occurs as a result of the arousal of emotion. Then the next topic was the part 5, in which we learn about the physiological correlates of emotions, in which we learn about different physiological correlates of emotions. So this is going to be the part 6, in which we will learn about the physiological changes during emotions. So part 4, 5, and 6, these are almost interrelated parts. So if you start learning this from the part 4, from the arousal of emotion, it will be very easy because it's kind of a revision of the previous topics. And physiological changes of emotions all about the physiological changes which occurs during the emotions or emotional changes. So let's start with the chapter 2, part 6, which is about the physiological changes during emotions. So the physiological changes during emotions, these have been divided into 2 different categories right here. We will cover the internal changes, the internal physiological changes during emotions, and then we will also cover the external physical changes or external physiological changes during emotions. So let's start with the internal changes. Now, the internal changes that occurs during the physiological arousal or during physiological changes of emotions, the internal physiological changes of emotions. So in internal changes, we will learn about the galvanic skin response, blood pressure, heartbeat, and blood volume. And then we will have a short discussion on the respiration or breathing cycle. Then we will learn about the sweating, the temperature in sweating, and then the pupil of the eye, salivary gland, muscle tension and tremor. And then there are some other changes, other internal changes, which include the goose flesh, which we also call this as a goosebumps, redness of the skin, gastrointestinal motility, metabolic rate, eye blinks and movement, content of urine and saliva, etc. So these are some of the internal physiological changes during emotion. So let's start with the galvanic skin response. It is also abbreviated as GSR. So electrical conductance of the skin increases with the degree of emotional arousal of the individual. The resistance to flow of a very weak and Unnoticeable electrical current from one point to another on the skin decreases with increase in arousal. So, this measurement is commonly called the galvanic skin response or simply GSR. Those who are aware that moisture, especially salty fluids, increase such conductivity of electricity might hasten to ascribe the GSR effect to sweating during emotion or emotional states. But though the GSR is very much involved with the physiology of the sweating or the sweat gland, evidence shows that the moisture secreted during the emotions contributes only part of the galvanic skin response effect. Now, the next internal physiological change would include blood pressure, heartbeat, and blood volume. So, changes in the pressure, volume, and composition of the blood and the rate of heartbeat may be used as indicator of changes in emotional state. In cases increases in blood pressure and increases in rate of heartbeat measured by the electrocardiogram or EKG usually occur with increases or increase in excitement of emotional arousal or increase in excitement of the emotional experience. Blood volume in an area is regulated by the constriction or dilation of the blood vessels and is responsible for the change in color, usually redness of the skin with emotion. So the blush of anger and the blanch of fear reflect the relative concentration of the blood. And the composition of the blood may be analyzed before and after emotion excitement to determine a change in the presence of blood sugar, adrenaline, red blood cells, and the acid base balance. Now, if we talk about the respiration or breathing cycle that occurs, or that is one of the internal physiological change during emotion. So, respiration and breathing cycle changes are apparent without spatial instruments in person undergoing an intense emotional experience. Quicker and more shallow breathing, for example, is a characteristic of an intense emotional experience of anger. Close measurement of respiration also shows small and brief changes to a very weak emotion evoking stimuli. So, a sudden interruption in breathing in response to an emotion provoking stimuli may not be noticed except with the aid of sensitive instruments. So, the temperature and sweating of the skin are linked to some extent in emotional states. Now, literature describes the frightened person as having cold, clammy hands, and the angry person as being hot under the collar. Some confirming research attention has shown that continued emotional stress is related to a lower skin or lowered skin temperature. So, sweating is detected in part by the galvanic skin response, or we can say GSR. So, sweating is detected in part by the GSR, but some patterns of moisture produced over the surface of the body are believed to be related to emotional states in which both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are involved. So, the next physiological internal change during emotion would include the pupil of the eye. So, the change in size of the pupil of the eye has long been known to vary with emotional state as well as light level. So, some recent speculation is that this emotion indicating mechanism distinguishes between unpleasant states, which includes the constriction of the opening of the pupil, and pleasant states, which includes the dilation of the pupil opening. So, firm evidence has long indicated that the pupil opens wide during a strong sympathetic nervous system activity. Now, the next one is about the salivary gland. So, salivary gland secretion is controlled by both sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. But there is evidence that these glands stop secreting, producing a dry mouth during emotional sympathetic reactions such as fear. And if we talk about the muscle and tremor, so muscles and tremor are also easily observed in emotional states without instruments. The familiar shaking and tightness of the muscles can be ascribed to these factors. Now let's talk about the other changes. A group of other changes may be measured during emotional states. The kilometer response produces goose flesh and makes hair stand on end. It makes the hair stand on end. And demographic is the measurement of the length of the time that redness of the skin persists after a sharp momentary pressure has been applied. And gastrointestinal motility is the relative activity of the digestive processes. Moreover, the metabolic rate may be monitored by bodily haste given off. Eye blinks and movement may be recorded. Analysis may be made of changes in the content of urine and saliva. So this was all about the internal physiological changes during emotion. Now let's come to another category of the physiological changes during emotions is the external physical changes, or we can say external physiological changes that occurs during emotions. We can say that a person's face is usually a barometer of his emotion, perhaps giving warning that our words and perhaps reassuring us that a certain person is receptive to our ideas. Now, some people seem to have more definite and more easily identifiable patterns of facial expressions than others. So, moreover, there appears to be considerable differences in the ability to interpret facial expressions of emotions in others. Let's talk about the vocal expressions, which is one of the external physiological changes of emotions. Now, the adult human voice is even richer than the face in varieties of emotional expressions. And changes in inflection, loudness, pitch, or timbre may be used to express various types of emotional experience. A rising inflection conveys a feeling of surprised doubt. Like, what? Is it time to go already? And the rising, then falling inflection shows sarcasm. For example, what a smart idea that was. Or you can say, what a smart idea that was. Like rising and then falling inflection. What a smart idea that was. A slow, dragging monotone expresses defeat and defection. For example, I failed the exam. I failed the exam. These are a type of slow, dragging monotone. So tone of voice associated with the particular emotions, higher pitch and strident tone is associated with anger, and the increase in body tension causes more tension in vocal cords, so thus raising the voice. So quavering and stuttering conveys a feeling of fear. For example, when someone say like I'm fine. So these are a type of like quavering and stuttering form of voice tone which shows that the person is feeling fear. So this was about the vocal expression. Now let's come to the postural expressions. Now these expressions differ from culture to culture, but still certain typical overt behavior are common. Now, for example, in anger, typical behavior is attack. Animal or uncivilized person throws himself on enemy, bites, hits, etc. And civilized person make use of cheering words. In pleasant emotion, essential responses approach. Fear involves flight or retreat. In grief, an extreme form of gloom, the individual fails to respond to even the most potent stimuli. So this was all about today's video. If your concept is clear, you can like the video. If not, you can ask us in the comment section about which point was a bit confusing for you or you didn't get it. Ask us in the comment section and we will be happy to help you out. Plus, if you're new to this channel, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to Dear Knowledge, click on the bell icon so you will never ever miss any notification. You can also share the link of this channel and the link of our video or channel with your family members and friends, because sharing is caring. Until then, Allah Hafiz.